25 years ago, they came with blueprints and promises. They came with speeches and renderings with words like revitalization, opportunity, transformation. They called it a remedy. They called it progress. They called it Heritage Park. And for a moment, a community dared to believe because the promise was not just brick and mortar. It was not just roofs and roads. The promise was dignity. The promise was safety. The promise was that children born on the north side would inherit possibility instead of neglect. The promise was that seamless lines in a community that didn't measure income, it measured housing, need, and it preserved it. Improved living conditions, no longer poverty concentrated behind invisible lines, and families connected to greater opportunity. The promise was the mistake of the past would never be repeated again. But today, we stand here in the shadow of that promise and ask the painful question what happened? Because promises are only as good as the people willing to keep it. And all around us, the evidence speaks, not in council chambers, not in reports, not in press release. It speaks in leaking ceilings, water stained walls, roofs that have failed, exposed wiring, dark hallways, in vacant homes sitting silent while families search for housing in nearly 200 units, offline, empty, uninhabitable, 200 plus opportunities lost, 200 doors closed, 200 reminders that neglect is not an accident, it's a choice. And when affordable housing falls into despair, when accountability disappears, when residents are left with questions and no answers, we begin to see the same patterns returning, patterns we promised to break, patterns of unsafe housing, patterns of die investment, patterns where Black families and BIPOC communities are asked once again to carry the burden of uncertainty, to wait, to be patient, to trust process. We've heard those words before. North Minneapolis knows those words. We know what it feels like to be promised investment and handed abandonment, to be promised opportunity and handed delay, to be promised transformation and handed deterioration. And yet, this poem is not about surrender because Heritage Park is more than a housing development, it's a test of whether MPHA and Minneapolis means what it says, a test of whether equity is more than a slogan, a test of whether every child, every senior, family, regardless of zip code or income, is worthy of a safe place to call home. Because housing is not just shelter, housing is public safety, housing is health, it's education, it's stability, it's the foundation upon which futures are built, and every family deserves that foundation. Every child deserves that environment, that investment. Every resident deserves dignity. Every community deserves the opportunity instead of decline. This is why we must ask the question, who is responsible for the needed repairs? Where are the resources? Why is a hazard here? When will the roofs be fixed? When will the homes be restored? And more importantly, when will families see the action instead of another promise? Because reports alone will not repair a roof, and meetings alone will not restore a home. Conversations alone will not house a family, and actions must follow words. Accountability must follow promises. I remain hopeful that we won't buy or sell another promise because I've seen neighbors fight for one another, because I've seen residents organize, because I've seen community leaders and partners and families come together when the stakes are highest. The conversation has started, the partners have been identified, they're at the table, and now the question is simple: when will the promise be kept? When will we restore what is broken? When will we prove that North Minneapolis deserved the same standard of housing, the same standard of investment, the same standard of dignity? Our families deserve better, our children deserve better, and the promise made 25 years ago deserves to be honored not with words or ceremonies or other ribbon cuttings or occupied homes, healthy homes, affordable homes where families can live and thrive and children can dream. We can restore Heritage Park and finish the work that has been started and make sure that the next generation does not inherit any more broken promises, but a fulfilled one.